Tonight on Nova, Richard Wheeler is a man obsessed. His passion, the auk, a flightless seabird which became extinct 100 years ago. Scientists know exactly when the last auk died, but questions remain. Are these modern-day cousins of the auk also in danger? Wheeler took to the sea in a one-man kayak, an amazing journey following the haunted cry of a long-gone bird.
Funding for NOVA is provided by
Merck, dedicated to pharmaceutical research, committed to discovery, improving health, extending life. Merck.
And Lockheed, America's aerospace company, supporting math, science, and engineering education for national technology leadership. Major funding for NOVA is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by annual financial support from viewers like you.
I'd have to admit it is a pretty off-the-wall thing to do for a 60-year-old geezer to get in a small boat and to try to recreate the migration route of an extinct bird. But there really was something in the nature of a quest that made it almost necessary for me to do it. In the beginning, I had a simple urge, really.
Where is that little funny dog?
I'd retired from my career as a teacher and museum administrator and wanted to get in touch with the outdoors again, while I still had my health and energy. So I started dreaming about a long coastal voyage by kayak.
We're going to have an amazing phone bill, that's what I think.
Years earlier, my readings in natural history led me to a book that changed me forever. It was about an extinct bird called the great auk. The great auks were extraordinary paddlers and swimmers, but couldn't fly. When they were attacked by feather hunters in the late 1700s, they didn't last long. After millions were killed, they became a rare prize. On June 3, 1844, 2 museum collectors strangled the last pair and stepped on the last egg. They had become too valuable to be allowed to live. Even if they hadn't been exterminated, I wondered how they would fare today in a world that has changed so much just in my lifetime. Suddenly it all came together. I would paddle my kayak along the coastal migration route of the great auk, trying to understand what it would be like to be one today, and sharing the auk story with anyone who would listen. That's how it all started. Sometimes the pursuit of a dream can call you to a strange, unsettled place, looking for life where you'd least expect to find it. My journey began on an isolated and windswept rock 30 miles off the north coast of Newfoundland. Funk Island. Local fishermen who brought us here call it a terrible, wonderful place. Some say it's haunted, but a few bird scientists like my friend Bill Montevecchi know this rock well. This was the center of the great auk's world, the place where most of them once gathered to breed before paddling south for the winter. It's still home to one of their closest surviving relatives, a bird only a third the size, called the common murre. Like the auk 300 years ago, these seabirds live most of their lives far from land. For a month during the short northern summer, most of the northwest Atlantic population of common murres meet and breed on this one rock. This is their only chance to lay an egg in a relatively safe place and keep it warm enough to hatch. There has always been a rich supply of small fish in the waters around Funk Island. Special skills are needed to go after them. The murres are like fish with feathers, able to plunge and pursue at amazing speeds. Great auks were even more skilled because they sacrificed the ability to fly to be superb divers. Sardine-sized capelin are the main seafood meal for the birds to bring home. Chicks are fed on the rock by their parents until they are just mature enough to live out on the open sea, which is exactly where I'm headed in my first leg of recreating the auk's migration.
Maybe you guys can hand me these after we get in.
I can tell that the fishermen don't have much faith in my kayak, even though they know I have a lot of paddling experience. It's a coastal boat at best, and what I have ahead today is 30 miles of open sea.
Hang on to
The crew that brought me here on the Lee Darrell is led by Skipper Bill Sturge, an expert fisherman.
You just keep giving me slack until I can get in.
What do you want?
There's something to hang on to. Can you give me a line so I can hold on?
I am not so sure that he understands why a 60-year-old grandfather wants to do this. He seems worried about the weather, too, but I trust him to shepherd me across this first difficult stretch to the mainland.
Yeah, if the wind picks up too much, we may have to call it off. But you'll be able to see me, and I'll be able to indicate to you if it's getting in over my head. Buzzards Bay can't be very far from here.
that way, Dick.
About now, I'm beginning to question whether this is such a good idea.
No wonder they're extinct.
But somehow I feel that the long-gone bird has a message for me, and it will only become clear by completely recreating its
I
journey.
don't have a compass. My compass broke off, so you're my compass, Bill.
Oh, yeah, okay.
The water was lumpy, to say the least. And as soon as I get out into the place where I could face the southwest wind, it was sort of, oh my God. And yet it was doable. I invested a lot of energy and muscle into the first 3 or 4 hours. And lo and behold, the wind did freshen up after I had about another 12, maybe 12 miles. And that was really tough slogging. So the waves seemed to tower over me, and the Lee Darrell was having not an easy time of it. I love small boats. The kayak is the most intimate vessel in its relationship with the water that I have ever been in. So it's a beautiful craft to carry out this kind of symbolic recreation of what the great auk did. The upshot of the day was that I had the paddle of my life, and I think I would have to say it was harder than anything else I've ever done by far. And of course, the difficulties and the pain were exacerbated by the fact that I'm 60 years old, and by the fact that I wasn't able to do all of the training that I'd hoped to do. As it took me between 16 and 17 hours. I don't believe in ghosts, and yet I do have the feeling that people and animals can somehow communicate with those who are living.
No photographs exist of a live great auk because they disappeared just before photography was invented, but I've studied the old drawings. They stood over 2 feet tall and looked somewhat like penguins. Richard Podolsky, an expert on endangered seabirds, had shown me an actual stuffed specimen, one of the few which still exist.
And this would be a very powerful bird. They were very muscular. You can see the general tubular shape of the body, much the way your kayak is designed around hydrodynamics. The great auk, of course, was flightless. It spent most of its time mobilizing, was of course paddling at the surface, but then its real design that you see here, this kind of torpedo shape, is to make it an efficient diver, a plunge diver. We know that razorbills, the nearest relative of the great auk, can dive several hundred meters. The great auk, being at least 3 or 4 times the size, probably had the ability to dive down maybe a kilometer down into the water. The feet, very, very large feet, very wide webs. Of course, that was their major propulsion. And of course, the wings, which are modified as flippers or paddles. This species survived a incredible reorganization of ocean basins, a change in continental arrangements, a complete remaking of its environment several times over in the last 40 to 50 million years. And the thing that I find still is problematical is how in such a short period of time, in association with human beings, just in the last 300 or 400 years, this bird, which had survived all of this geological time, in such a short period of time, it was able to be brought to extinction.
Bill Montevecchi had told me some of the history of what had happened on Funk Island.
The birds nest there in tremendous abundance because of the isolation of Funk Island, and that's probably why in the past that the great auks nested there. And it's very isolated. It's about 60 kilometers off the northeast coast of Newfoundland, and that pretty much protected those animals from exploitation by terrestrial predators. And that story sort of changed in the 15th century when Europeans began coming to Newfoundland to exploit the fishery, to exploit whales, and also to exploit seabirds for food. And actually Funk Island, in a sense, was North America's first fast food takeout. Most of the ships that would cross from England and come in to the northeast coast of Newfoundland would stop by Funk Island to replenish their food supplies. But so here we are, meadow of the great auk.
We had walked to the only part of Funk Island not washed by storm waves.
Yeah, and this is it's the remains of this stone house. And
this is where the last North American great auks were killed. The stones piled here once formed pens where the birds were herded and held before slaughter.
The soil itself is composed to a great extent of the actual decomposed bodies of the great auks that were slaughtered here.
Early sailors in need of food had taken only as many birds as they could eat. Later in the 18th century, hunters motivated by the commercial value of feathers and fat clubbed every bird that waddled ashore.
For fat or for feathers, the animal would be killed, rendered down, and then discarded. Yeah, and that's
the auks' mating refuge became a killing ground, still haunted by their bones.
Years old, and that's right from here.
I landed on the mainland at 2 o'clock in the morning. My legs were numb. I was shivering and near hypothermia. The fishermen had to help me out of the boat, but I had survived my first test as a great auk.
Oh, yeah. I got it. Well, I thought you were crazy.
Yeah, well, maybe I am.
No, I see now you're not crazy. But to do what you did, I don't know where you got the nerve and the gall and the energy and the strength to do what you did.
I was glad to count Skipper Bill Sturge a true friend after that first hard crossing. But what he had told me about the Newfoundland fishery made me worry about his future.
What's next? What has to happen?
Fishery in a state of emergency now, I would say.
Yeah. When you say
if it's foreign trawlers and me size, and so many fishing boats, that there's going to be no fishery left. In 5 years' time, there'll be no fishery for Newfoundlanders.
Wow. Enjoyed the gaping.
That's what we call it now, fish.
Saying goodbye was hard, but Bill and his men had heard rumors of fish and needed to get back to work. The solo part of my journey is beginning now. At a few points along the way, I'll be escorted by a film crew, but for most of it, I'll paddle alone, using an onboard camera to keep a journal. I've got 1,500 miles of coastal voyaging ahead. Like the Great Auk, I'll see a lot of Newfoundland waters, then paddle on down through Nova Scotia and eventually to New England and my home near Cape Cod, Massachusetts. If I make it, the trip should take 4 months. A long paddle like this is something I've dreamed of ever since I started kayaking 40 years ago. I like the feeling of exploring in a small boat under my own power. I am vulnerable to nature's forces, but the reward is an intimacy with every detail of sea life. The rhythm of paddling lets my imagination wander. I've even had a fantasy about finding a real great auk, still alive. I don't like facing up to the reality that there are none here, except for little Aukie, the carved figurehead I made for the kayak.
Now I'm on my way again the next day, and there's a pretty strong southwest wind, but it's off the land. So as long as I stay in close to shore, I'm okay. But about a mile out there, it's blowing 25 and on up, and I wouldn't want to be out there. And I'm about to round a point where I'm going to catch the wind in the face for just a little bit. And then I think I'll be in the lee again. But I may have to hang on here for just a little bit. It wasn't blowing much harder than this when I came in from the funks, but the waves were just crashing all over me. Here they don't have time to build up. It's just hard work, that's all. But every time you round a corner in this part of the coast, you're coming onto another little beautiful inlet. And another cluster of homes and more fishing boats.
These Newfoundland outports are totally dependent on fishing. Like the bird colonies on Funk Island, they can only exist by harvesting the sea. In the beginning, there was the cod, known here simply as fish. In the 15th century, Europeans came for that fish. Some have stayed here fishing ever since, almost as if after the long passage they couldn't fully step out of their boats. Archie Lake and his brother Frank still use the cod jig, an ancient technique over 2,000 years old. A weighted hook is lowered and the jigger goes to work, trying to attract the attention of a bottom-swimming cod. The only thing that's new is the ping of the electronic fish finder.
Come on, codfish. Get your breakfast. Oh, I got him. Hey. Got him? No. Oh, could lose him. Oh, yeah. There he comes. Ah, ha, ha. There we go. That's why I fish the fish. Try again.
For as long as the brothers can remember, the fish have always come as they did for their father and grandfathers. The long-line trawl is another age-old technique. Gangs of hooks are baited with something tempting like cut-up herring or squid, then lowered over the side with anchor weights at either end and floats to mark the location. rows of bait floating near the bottom present a buffet for passing fish. The price for this easy meal is the hook hidden inside. But not everyone succumbs to temptation, and uninvited diners can go after the bait. Fish too small to swallow the hook are exempt, but larger ones who do must wait for the fisherman to return.
One fish. Here he comes.
The Lake brothers say the cod used to be a lot bigger and more plentiful than what they catch now. But because they are fishermen, they go right on fishing.
Yeah. Hello there. Hey. Where'd you come from, that thing?
I can stay clear.
You're out on a rough day, eh?
Have you got any?
Oh, I got a couple.
I surprised a lot of people like Archie and Frank during my first couple of weeks as I learned more about Newfoundland's famous wind and fog.
If I waited for perfect days, I'd still be back in Funk Island. So you got to be careful. You can't go out in stuff that is truly life-threatening, but you do have to kind of stretch it a little bit now and then.
I don't think I've ever been happier to be on dry land. I'll tell you why. I started out this morning in beautiful, it never gets any better than this weather. I got about 8 miles into it, and of course, the weather changed. The wind started coming up just as I was rounding a point where there was a lot of rebound waves, and there was a lot of activity there for a while. What really bothered me, though, was that I started getting a leak behind me in my spray cover. And that was really bothersome because that water had been an iceberg about a day and a half ago, and it didn't really feel good in my cockpit. And as it rose, it felt less good. And then it began to affect my stability. So that made me say, we've got to find ourselves a beach. And look at the beach I found. So why not stay right here? This isn't meant to be agony, and I'm a bit uncomfortable now, but I'm going to make myself all better in the next 2 or 3 hours.
I have been terrified on this trip. I think real danger begins when you're on the ocean and not afraid. I see fear and respect and humility as all kind of blending into one in dealing with the ocean. And anyone who doesn't have those in abundance is just asking for trouble.
My survival depends on staying above the surface, but I'm constantly thinking about what goes on under my boat. An auk could dive into this underwater world, and today it would notice a lot of changes. The bays that are beautiful but barren of fish now were teeming with fish, just swarming on the surface when John Cabot first saw the place in 1500. They just lowered baskets over the side, the cod were so thick. They even wrote about the difficulty of rowing through them. But now you look down through clear water. It's beautiful, but where's the fish life? I passed by Gull Island in southern Newfoundland, our continent's biggest puffin colony. My friend Bill Montevecchi has been doing research here for 15 years, studying these diving relatives of the great auk during the brief season when they nest in underground burrows.
This one seems pretty good so far.
Here we go. Oh, it's okay. The reason I think it's so important to study seabirds, and the most important thing I think that we can learn from these animals is, in fact, what's happening in the marine environment. I mean, for the most part, we think of marine biology as taking place underwater. These birds fly in the air, they fly underwater. But these birds, you know, they're easy to count, they're easy to see, they're vulnerable to oil, they're vulnerable to getting caught in fishing gear. Some of them are hunted. They're persecuted by gulls. There's a lot of things happening to them. These birds are also dependent on a rich capelin supply, and this year in particular, the capelin are particularly late, so we're going to spend a lot of time this year looking at the growth and the parental provisioning of these parents to their chicks, and we'll actually look at how well they do. I'll pull out the chick so we can take a look at it. And I'll put his mom or dad back in so we can take a better look at the little chick. They're fantastic little guys. What we do is actually weigh these guys and measure their wing to get an indication of their age, and weigh them and follow them over the period that they grow up, which will be here during the month of August primarily, and see what weights they'll fledge at and how well they do. They're really good indicators of the state of the capelin fishery, because they're just totally dependent on capelin for survival. If it's a bad capelin year, it's a bad puffin year.
Usually by this time of year, puffins would find plenty of capelin schooling near shore, getting ready to spawn. But this year there are few. One reason may be the intensive fishery for capelin, which has sprung up in the last few years. The Japanese will buy eggs from spawning females, but the other 95% of the catch is discarded. The same way the auks killed for feathers on Funk Island were wasted.
In Newfoundland, if it isn't one thing, it's two or three other things. Yesterday, in the same part of the ocean, I was battling high winds. Today, I'm out here and I'm not battling it, but this fog is kind of thick. I can see the bow of the boat. My favorite remark on the weather so far is a man in Renews. He said, well, the weather isn't as good as it should be. And he paused and said, but then again, it never is.
As I continued on, I told stories of the great auk to people I met along the way.
They kept killing them and killing them and killing them, and finally there's just no more left.
What's your name? Kirsten.
Kids took an interest in my voyage. The weather may be unpredictable, but no matter where I land, I've learned I can be sure of one thing: the hospitality of Newfoundlanders. My God, here is a culture that knows in its heart what being out in the cold is really like. They took me in and I grew to love them. Further down the coast, I began to see bigger towns, still totally devoted to fishing. Their prosperity was based on a development in fishing technique about 100 years old, the cod trap. Traps are stationary nets set near the coast to catch migrating schools of cod. At Petty Harbor, the trap sites have traditional names like the Minister, the Front Door, or the Pulpit, and fishermen like Sam Lee draw lots to see who gets to use them each year.
I learned how to fish from my father. I fished all summer with my father from the time I was about 10 years old. I trapped cod while the trap season was there, and then after that I go hand lining.
Once the trap is set with nets and anchors, it fishes 24 hours a day. A long leader net intercepts fish swimming along the shore and leads them through a funnel-shaped opening into the trap. Most of the fish can't find their way out. Sam, his brother, and a friend come out every 3 or 4 days to retrieve whatever fish have been caught. When this technique came into use in the 1870s, fewer fishermen could harvest more cod. In the last 20 years, the traps have become even more effective. New designs hold the fish indefinitely, and finer mesh nets catch smaller fish. But lately, the cod just haven't been coming in the numbers Sam remembers.
Now back about 9-10 years ago, we see something happen with the fishery. We see that the fish was becoming scarcer. It was leaving our shores faster than usual.
Coming up all right, Ross?
And then eventually it just kept going down and down and down, and no matter what you did, you couldn't find it.
See everyone in it? Yeah. Only a handful in it. That's what's left to the northern cod fishery. Nothing. What? A knife, put a hole in that.
These juvenile fish aren't old enough to spawn. The larger mesh nets used until a few years ago would have let them swim through and survive to reproduce.
That's not even 2-year-old. That might be a year old. Yeah. You know, it's only about 8 inches. As you see today, we only had maybe 20 or 30 pounds of it in the cod trap that's been fishing for 4 days. So we just put a hole in it so the fish could swim away. So what I believe caused was the offshore fishing on the spawning grounds while the fish were trying to spawn. And the government letting them do it. And no one full well what was happening. And all they said, there's no evidence to prove that it's hurting them.
Every once in a while, I think of the real great auks swimming along with their fledglings, the ones born this year at Funk Island. And imagine them after they paddle 500 miles. And can't you see those little auks turning to their mummies and their daddies and saying, "Are we there yet?" I don't know, how would you dare tell them that they've still got 1,000 miles to go? Holy smokes.
Thanks very much. My name is Dick Wheeler. I'm the guy who's paddling around the world.
I heard of it.
Yeah, you did. You heard it on the radio? Or? Yeah.
Word about me is getting out now that Canadian radio has been broadcasting updates on my trip.
That's the ark.
Yeah, the great ark. Tony, somebody, I know.
I guess it's something if you was used to, you man. But I think I should be my own boat me that day.
My own brothers are fishermen, so I get a lot of grief right in my own family.
No, we use nets now. We usually trawl all the time, and now this year we started net on it, so.
Has it been a good year? Yeah. Bad. I haven't run into any place where it's really been a good year.
Really bad this year.
Yeah.
No laughter or nothing.
You get the feeling there's a real crisis on in the fishery, and yet, I hear scientists on CBC radio, and you keep reading that the fish are just out there. The water temperature was wrong.
Everybody has excuses for things.
Yeah. The great auk once existed in such quantities that people thought that no matter what they did, they'd always be there. And after they were gone, the scientists for 40 years said there's another stock of them up in the Arctic, not to worry. And it took 40 years before they realized that they were gone.
When I think about the ocean as a teacher, and as the best teacher, and I think of these very, very intelligent Newfoundland fishermen I've met, they've had good educations, and they've also learned from their parents and their grandparents. And their individual wisdom and their collective wisdom is extraordinary. But no one seems to be listening to them.
Just when everyone had given up on the capelin, a few of them finally appear. They school in the shoals beneath my kayak, preparing for a yearly journey to their neighbor's land, where they will swim out of the water and lay and fertilize their eggs on the beach. This is the moment everyone was waiting for, when eggs offer the promise of new life, and the capelin coming ashore to spawn and die provide a feast all along the coast. Everyone celebrates. The birds scout meals from above, their screams marking the place. Just offshore, a female humpback and her calf feed on whole schools with each mouthful.
Whoa, that's a big one.
Yeah, that's about the biggest you can
That's
get.
about as big as they get, huh?
Yeah, that is the biggest.
That's it. That's as big as they get.
I know they come in June, so every morning since 1st of June, I can't open them up.
For the people here, the return of even a few capelin is a hopeful sign that maybe everything is all right with the neighboring sea. That the cycles which have sustained people, birds, and fish will continue. Even potatoes grow better with capelin fertilizer.
Just pray for good weather, and I'll soon be at Port aux Basques. Soon after that, I'll be on the Nova Scotia coast. And, God, we're gonna do it. We're gonna do it.
I was out of Newfoundland, through the Bras-d'Or Lakes, and heading down the coast of Nova Scotia to the town of Lunenburg.
2 hours ago, I was battling 25-mile-an-hour northwest winds from the worst direction possible, from right behind me. And now here I am in a bucolic, kind of 6 or 8 mile natural channel, back route from Mahone Bay area to Lunenburg. And it is so beautiful. It's almost like the English countryside. And there's Lunenburg up ahead. Looks mighty nice.
Lunenburg is a port with a long history of deep-sea fishing and larger vessels. Over the years, it has been prosperous. Its boats have changed with the times to adopt the most successful methods. Today, things are slower. Fisheries museums are replacing fishing.
The Fisheries Museum of the Atlantic, located right here in Lunenburg, has a great collection of fisheries vessels, and Teresa Connor, that right in the background, is a vessel that I imagine is much like the one in Captain's Courageous, the We're Here. And the romance of that captured me so much that I had to go out on the Grand Banks myself. And one summer I did on a vessel very much like that gray one. That's the kind of boat that had evolved by then. So coming here really means a lot to me. It just ties together a lot of things from my past.
The history of fishing techniques displayed here could hold a key to understanding why codfish seem to be going the way of the great auk. Until about 80 years ago, big schooners from Lunenburg sailed to the fishing grounds. They served as motherships to small dories which did the real fishing, using baited hooks just like Archie Lake and his brother back in Newfoundland. Year after year, century after century, hook and line methods yielded good catches. The work was hard, but the fish were big and plentiful. These methods didn't really change until the beginning of this century, when the first draggers or side trawlers appeared on the Grand Banks. They fished with funnel-shaped nets towed astern, using the increased power of engines instead of sails. Any fish unlucky enough to be in front of the net were hauled on board. This is the type of vessel I crewed on, a state-of-the-art in 1951. Catches were good if you could guess where the fish were. Rapid change in the reach and power of fishing technology began in the 1960s with the invention of huge stern trawling draggers with onboard processing and freezing plants. International fleets of these modern fish killers concentrated their efforts on the rich fishing banks off Newfoundland. They were able to drag nets 1,000 feet underwater and work in areas that had never been fished before. Cod gathering for their annual spawning had always been protected by the sea ice and the great depth, but now they were easy targets. With the 200-mile limit, Canadian companies began building their own fleets of big draggers to go after the cod offshore. The high-tech nets these draggers use are called otter trawls, the most aggressive fishing tool yet devised. Their wide chain mouths drag along the seafloor, held open by metal hydrovanes, churning up bottom silt and frightening fish toward the net opening. Eventually, fish tire of trying to stay ahead of the net and turn back to be trapped in the long, narrow tube called the cod end. Small fish or unwanted species caught in the crush usually don't escape, even if they could pass through the mesh. Next year's fish are killed along with this year's. Otter trawls pulled by ships using electronic fish finding and precise satellite navigation can vacuum the ocean bottom like a rug, taking everything in their path and leaving a disrupted seabed behind. The catches have been large and profitable, just like the harvest of auks from Funk Island.
What I've been seeing as I come along the coast is denial on the individual and corporate and national level. The inshore fishermen blame the offshore dragger fishermen, and the offshore dragger fishermen blame the foreign fleets, and it's just a classic case of denial. Someone else did it. But when it's all documented, I think that these guys, the offshore draggers, will have been the guy in the black hat. They are capable of the most enormous destruction of the ocean bottom and of the fishery stocks. You know, they're known to throw over millions and millions of pounds of juvenile fish every year. And now the plants are beginning to close one by one in Nova Scotia and in Newfoundland. They're not getting the fish they need in order to operate these massive plants. It's pretty scary. It's scary on an economic level. It's scary on a social level. And what are these people going to do? But again, I come back to the scariest of all. What does it mean to me and to you and to people who live all over the world if we have effectively destroyed the ability of the ocean to produce protein? And we're doing it. And the forces are so powerful that I'm not sure we're going to be able to change them. You know, man is a predator of the highest order. We talk about management, we talk about conservation, but the forces of exploitation are so powerful.
hope we can learn from our old mistakes. That must be why the great auk keeps whispering warnings in my ear. I just had my 61st birthday, so I'm getting a little older and a little homesick too. It's the end of September, and before me is the Bay of Fundy, famous for the world's biggest tidal range. Water flowing in and out of the bay creates strong currents offshore. The fall winds are here in force, whipping up quite a chop over the 30 miles I have to cross. I feel vulnerable and don't want to end up dead like the real auks, or this little migrant who didn't make it. And tomorrow it's southwest, but hard. It's going to blow harder.
Yeah, it gives 30 for tomorrow.
Yeah. What's the good wind? Is there a good wind for the Bay of Fundy?
Well, no wind.
No wind is the best. I like that. Yeah. We're going to have to figure out another way of getting over to the other side. I swallowed my pride, figuring that I had a few frequent paddler miles stored up. Aukie and I rode the ferry across the Bay of Fundy. We are headed for Eastport, Maine to begin the final leg of our journey. The next morning I woke up to a calm sunrise and a place where there still are some fish. The great summer runs of Atlantic salmon in Maine's rivers are long gone, but a few of their distant descendants are settling for a more sheltered life. I had heard of fish farms, but never seen one. 7 operations have sprung up around Eastport, so I thought I'd put on our warm gear and paddle out to take a look.
They go 18 months in the hatchery, then usually 18 months in the sea. Then by the end of that period, they're between anywhere from 6 to 11, 12 pounds.
Wow.
We were originally scallop fishermen, but you see year after year that the fisheries are being depleted, that there just aren't as many scallops around, or there aren't as many herring around. And so we thought we'd try this and give this a shot. Like I say, we started out with 2 pens, built our way up to 22 now, I believe we have. So I think this is the fishing of the future.
They are beautiful.
You can see when they come up, they're pretty good size. They're probably, most of them upwards of 8 pounds. The care that you give the fish is really the important thing. It's a job where you always have to be on top of it. You have to make sure that the fish don't have disease, that they're well taken care of, and that they're well fed all the time. Well, it's mostly just fish meal and vitamins and fish. A lot of herring in it. Vitamins, fish meal.
Although the farm seems independent from the rest of the sea, it's not. Food for the captive fish still comes from wild herring or fish waste harvested by regular fishermen. Fish farms need a healthy sea around them. Even then, they'll never be able to produce the tonnages that could come from the wild grounds we are destroying. But I have a question. Why can't we care for the whole ocean the way John cares for his fish? Why do we have to rope off a tiny piece of it and say, "This is mine," before we act responsibly?
Bar Harbor and Southwest Harbor, Camden and Rockport, those are coastal ports that say the essence of Maine to a lot of people. But, you know, they're like Hollywood movie sets by comparison with a
a real working port like Rockland. That's where we are now. And Rockland has always been in my lifetime at least, the big fishing port in Maine. And now it would seem as if they're approaching the end of a fishery here too.
You had the Holmes's place, that burnt down and closed down. National Sea Products, of course, left from here 2 years ago. We've closed down. Smaller companies that used to process fish have all just gone by the wayside. And it has gone from 2,000 people down to 200 total, I would say, in just Rockland.
It does seem as if the more I go, the more support I get for my contention that we're headed towards commercial extinction, at least of all of the fish that we associate with the Gulf of Maine and Newfoundland.
Back in Newfoundland, the Canadian government finally came to the same conclusion that Bill Sturge and the other fishermen had foreseen. Canadian Commissioner of Fisheries John Crosby had to make a major announcement to the press and worried people in fishing towns all along the coast.
We need to reduce catches to a minimum to protect the dangerously low spawning stock, the lowest level since records began. For all of those reasons, and to safeguard the northern cod as a species, I've decided that effective at midnight tonight, there will be a moratorium on harvesting of northern cod until the spring of 1994.
At one point, the numbers of great auks were dangerously low, too. And then there was just one egg left. What change in understanding is necessary for us to allow something valuable to us to live?
I still find the best way to explain the Great Auk Project is, in fact, in terms of that a sculptor might use. Now, I just caught a vision of what could be done with a human being following the route of that magnificent bird. It was as if I saw a figure in a piece of wood or in granite and just plain had to release it. I felt really compelled to shape that idea and maybe just through that act make people more aware.
A production of WGBH Boston. Funding for NOVA is provided by Lockheed, America's aerospace company, supporting math, science, and engineering education for national technology leadership.
And by Merck, dedicated to pharmaceutical research, committed to discovery, improving health, extending life. Merck.
Major funding for NOVA is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by annual financial support from viewers like you.
This is PBS.
Next time on Nova.
I'm so excited!
Ruth Pointer, nearing menopause, gives birth to twins. Aileen Lee, at 21, finds herself unexpectedly in menopause. Science now offers these women options never before available. But are they right for everyone?
It doesn't hit you that she's going through menopause. It just hits you that she's just being a pain in the neck.
What's new about menopause? Next time on Nova.
For a transcript of the NOVA program you've just seen, send $5 to this address or call 1-303-831-9000.